Okay, hi booktube, Aaron here, hope you're doing okay. Today I've got a tag for you. It's not Tag Tuesday, but I'm going to be doing a tag, and it's a bit odd because it's an original tag. I haven't done my own tag before, so we'll see how this goes. And I'm going to call it the Western Literature Book Tag, and it's the result of a bit of a rabbit hole that I fell down the other day. Or the other night. I was staying well past my bedtime, thinking about the Western canon and the way it affects our reading, and also the way that our reading affects the way we see it. And it wasn't long before I was making my list, and that's really why I was staying up well past my bedtime, pulling down books from the shelves, and thinking of books that represent my reading of Western literature in general. So this is what this tag is kind of about. It's about books that represent your reading of Western literature. So let's get into it, and I'll try to stop rambling. So the first, the general idea is this. So you're going to choose 20 books to represent your reading of Western literature. You can include books from any period or any genre, and you can define Western literature as you will, and feel free to choose more than 20 books or less than 20 books. I just chose that as a good round number for me. So that's the general idea of it. So you're going to be choosing 20 books to represent your reading of Western literature. So the first prompt then, as we're thinking about this, is if you could choose 20 books to represent your reading of Western literature, how would you choose them, and what would you look for? So for me, part of that would be, I just love beautiful writing, and that comes in, different shapes and forms from book to book. I love an element to the writing that makes it feel like it's a story that's been told, just sort of year after year, like an old oral story, and that kind of storytelling tradition, I suppose. So I love books that feel like that, and then I love stuff that is just it's hard to explain, but it is just beautiful, like Shakespeare and all sorts of stuff. So that's something I look for. I also love to use literature as a way to relate to history and to grapple with the questions that come to mind when you're looking at history. And also I just love books that talk about books and the way that books talk to each other. So there are some of the ways that I choose the books to include in this kind of list, and I'm sure you've got plenty of your own. Prompt number 2 is, after choosing 20 books, what blind spots did you notice? Because there are going to be blind spots. It's a very, selective list, I suppose. And we're only looking at Western literature. And even in that, you're probably going to notice things that you've missed out. So for me, 2 of the big ones is that I've left out lots of ancient classics. There's not a lot. Well, there's nothing from Greece and Rome here. I chose a totally different starting point for this list. And also it's pretty English language heavy as well. There's a lot of stuff from the British Isles and from Ireland and from America. And although there are are books here from other places in Europe and the Americas, it is pretty Anglophone heavy. And that's just something I noticed. And it's a good thing to notice these things. I think it does inform your reading, I suppose. But then really getting into the heart of the tag now. So what 20 books would you choose to represent your reading of Western literature? So let's get into it. And I've chosen to go through chronologically here. You don't have to, but that's just the way I chose to do it. So my first book here, again, so I'm not starting with Greece and Rome. Instead, I'm starting in Ireland, and I'm starting with the Toyn book Cooley, and it's just a great energetic work of literature about a cattle raid and the violence that ensues. It includes the great Irish hero Cooley, who goes into like a battle fury, and he's quite frightening, really. But yeah, just the energy of this book is amazing, and the violence is over the top. And it has, it is a story that's been told sort of time and time again, and then was written down. And I just love the feel that you get with that. Then moving over into the medieval period, into the early Renaissance, we've got the Divine Comedy by Dante, and this includes, sort of lots of the figures from ancient mythology and literature that I overlooked, but also just, on his own terms, Dante is just wonderful, and yeah, there's just something to him that I love, I find comforting, and I enjoy being in his company. So yeah, there's no one else quite like Dante for me. He's a great. And then jumping forward again, I'm missing out loads of great medieval literature that I love, but we're jumping into the early modern period now with Shakespeare. It's hard to leave him out of this kind of list. And for me, if I had to choose just one play, I'd go with Hamlet. And again, that's with the plays that I've read so far. And I would say that my favourite play is The Tempest. But just think about this kind of list. Hamlet just goes to places that the plays that I've read by Shakespeare just don't go to. And it's, just a wonderful, deep, brooding, and beautiful play. And then jumping forward again, we're missing out loads of great stuff from the 17th and 18th century, and we're going straight to the Romantic period, and we're missing out loads of great Romantic poets that I love. But if I had to just choose one Romantic poet, I think I would choose John Keats. So even something small like this, there's just a little tiny penguin that's just called The Eve of St. Agnes, and it's got that poem. It's got La Belle Dame sans Merci in it. It's got Lamia, Ode to Psyche, which I love, and Ode on a Grecian Urn. But his poems from 1820, if you can just read that, that's amazing. So yeah, I love John Keats, and he definitely makes the list for me. And then sticking to the Romantic period, but now a novel, one of my favourite novels, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And for me, not only is, I feel like she captures that romantic feeling just really, really well, almost better than some of the Romantic poets do. But also the idea of the darkness of human progress, that kind of cynicism, that's something that's always in the back of my head when I'm thinking about literature and when I'm thinking about history in general. So an incredibly influential book for me. Then inching forward just a little bit, and like Shakespeare, this is just one of those authors that I would just feel bad if I left them out, and they totally deserve to be here, and it's Jane Austen. And for me, I'd have to include Persuasion. And for me, I feel like it's her Hamlet. It feels deeper than a lot of her books to me, and it's a little darker and more brooding than her other books. So for me, it would be Persuasion. I think I need to do a bit of another read through of her novels and give Pride and Prejudice and Emma another go, because I don't love them as much as Persuasion. Anyway, going forward, and for the next two, I've got picks from the Brontes, and I've only read books by Charlotte and Emily, so it's really no surprises. We've got Jane Eyre, and then we've got Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte as well. And I really love this edition. It's got Cathy there on the front, at least I think that's supposed to be Cathy, and then we've got Heathcliff there on the back. And yeah, that sort of gothic sensibility is something I really look for as well. It's not something I always look for, but it's something I love and really appreciate in literature, and also specifically in English literature. It's just one of those great little hallmarks, I suppose. Yeah, really love it. And then to represent the big, shaggy, Victorian novel, for me there's nothing much better than Bleak House by Charles Dickens. I'd say this is the closest thing to virtual reality that I've ever read. It's just so, you just kind of get lost in this world. There's so many great characters. You just get totally sucked into it, and I just think it's wonderful. So yeah, Bleak House by Charles Dickens. So it's a must for me. And then another big shaggy monster of a book, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. And again, this has got this element of literature engaging with history and getting us to think about the ways we as individuals relate to history and are involved in history as well. So yeah, a great, and again, it's a must for me. And then moving out of the 19th century, well, towards the end of it and into the early 20th century, and this was one of the first writers that I just jumped to, that I just have to include in this list, and that's W.B. Yates, and just a general selection of his poetry for me is, yeah, it's just, it's great. And I suppose one of the things I love is his poetry is undeniably beautiful, but it doesn't always make a lot of sense. And I love the fact that it doesn't have to make sense. It's a puzzle that you don't have to put together, and I don't think you really could put together. And I love that. The same could be said of the next writer, another poet, and it's Raina Maria Rilke. And if you love walking in the woods at autumn and looking at starry skies, then I think you'll get on with Rilke. And I love walking in the woods at autumn and looking at starry skies, so I get on with Rilke. And then moving on, another poet, and now we're firmly in the modernist period, and it's The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. And again, so here we've got a work of poetry that is sort of speaking to other books and works of art. It's engaging with history in certain ways, and it's also beautiful and disturbing and just magnificent. So yeah, I again, The Wasteland is a must for me. And then moving on to another novel, and for me this is one of those novels that just totally changed what I thought a novel could do. And it's Light in August by William Faulkner. Again, one of those books that's dealing with history and dealing with the darkness of society and Western culture, particularly, in the American South, and race relations and stuff like that. But it's a remarkable book, and it was eye-opening for me, just what Faulkner's able to do with a novel. And again, one of those eye-opening writers, but this time with short stories, and it's Jorge Luis Borges and his fictions, or ficciones, I suppose. I don't know, I don't speak Spanish, as I'm sure you know. And yeah, these short stories, they speak to other works of literature, and they get us thinking about the nature of literature and fiction itself. And yeah, they're just whole worlds. He does so much in just a few short pages, and there are just many of his classic stories are in here. There's The Library of Babel, The Garden of Forking Paths, Tlon, Orbis, and no, not Orbis, the Tlon story. It's Just really, really good. So if you haven't read Borges yet and you love stories that really probe at the nature of literature and then just turn everything upside down, I think you'll love Borges. And then we've got the last 5 here. And so the next one is one of those foundational books for me. And it has that element that it feels like it's a story that's been told time after time, even though it really hasn't, but it's trying to engage with that kind of literature, and it's The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. And I think he is trying to fill the gap that was left, with Anglo-Saxon literature and mythology. We don't really have any of that, and I think he's trying to fill the gap there for us with Lord of the Rings. And it feels like that to me. It is fantasy, but it's also mythology, and to me it feels like a work of lost ancient mythology and literature to me. Then moving on, it's the last work of poetry on this list, and it's Ariel by Sylvia Plath, and again it's just one of those. It's one of those books that, again, it got me thinking about poetry in a bit of a different way. It changed how I thought of a poem and what a poem can do. The word confessional is thrown around a lot with Sylvia Plath. And although they are confessional, they're not obviously confessional. There's something elusive and kind of symbolist to her poetry, which I really love. And with a lot of the poets I've included, that elusiveness is something that I really appreciate in poetry and literature in general. And then next up, again, that kind of storytelling tradition is coming through, and it's The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. And for me, this just represents the way that our stories live with us, the way we tell them and retell them, and the way we can enjoy them as well. It's a really funny book, quite a dark book as well, but a very funny book. And then, like Light in August, this is just a novel that totally changed what I thought a novel could do, but also just the writing here is arresting and beautiful, and it's Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. And you could go into what Morrison is writing about black history in America and race relations and all of the nuances and complexities there. She also touches on on a little bit on Native American history as well in here, although that's not her main focus. It's definitely touched upon. But again, just the writing itself is arresting, and it's got one of the best endings I've ever read, and it's just so elusive, but also just feels open and just perfect to me. So, Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. And then to finish things off, book number 20 for me is The Ring of Saturn by W.G. Sebald. And for me this is, again, it changes what I think fiction can do. And I love the fact that it's a book that feels like you're daydreaming as you're going through it. And it feels like a sleepwalk. But it's also making connections between all these really random sort of historical sort of moments in history, and with literature and with place. It's just a remarkable book, and I really love W.G. Sebald. And there we go. So that's my list of 20 books that represent at least my reading of Western literature. Before I go, I'm going to tag a bunch of people. As I say quite often with these tags, if I haven't tagged you specifically but you'd like to do it, then feel free to do it. But I'm going to specifically tag another Bibliophile Reads, Anna Mo Shoshin, AJ Dunn Reads and Writes, The Channel of a Disappointed Man, A Cruel Reader's Thesis, Bookish, Books I'm Not Reading, Bookhands and Books, Book Time with Elvis, David Wiley, Dejection Cat Reads, Enter the Book, Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse, Fraser Simons, Springboard Thought, Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff, Jordan Parsons, Knitting Books, etc., Micah Cummins, Novel Opinions, Old Blues Chapter and Verse, Rambling Raconteur, Read by Fred, Reading This Life, Sean D. Standfast, Shelley Swearingen and Steve Donoghue. So there we go, a fairly substantial list, but yeah, feel free to do the tag if you'd like to. If you don't, no worries. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.